Welcome back to the Grand Solar Minimum channel. Hope everyone is doing well out there on this fine September Saturday here, the first weekend. Possibly, if you live in the Northeast, you're starting to feel those fall effects, but if you live everywhere else, it's hot. Let's get on. I know I'm excited too, guys. Okay, dogs are really excited. So was I. All right, let's get to it though. It's good to be back. We had a little bit of a what you would call a hiatus, but here we are doing our updates once again. Like I said, today is September 9th, 2023. Let's do a quick little solar wind and space weather update here. Right now, we're sitting at 365 kilometers per second with a density of 3.4. Our sunspot average right now, number is 123. Now, when I was putting this show together this morning, I was looking at some of the stats that were already on the OBS software that we use, and I'm telling you guys, I know we've been gone for a little bit, but space weather wise, it's almost like the numbers have stayed the same. I didn't have to change much here, and it's kind of just funny to me because part of this update is going to be talking about how we are in a maximum, but yet I still don't feel like that this is a very strong maximum. When cosmic radiation dosage rates, they're only down 2.1% below average, and we are in a solar maximum. And we'll get to that here in a little bit. But right now, our KP indices are sitting at a 2 with a 24-hour max of a 3. So nothing really geomagnetic happening. We do have a 5% chance of X-class flares. And again, we haven't had any sunspot-less days. That's not going to happen anytime soon. Like I said, we are in a maximum. And I think we talked about this back in March when we had our brief appearance. And we were trying to also speak about the cycle and how it's going and everything. And the thing that was interesting then, and before we stopped doing regular shows, is that, Valentina Zarkova also has this abbreviated cycle that's predicted for solar cycle 25. Now, is it performing a little bit stronger than the previous solar cycle? Yes, but if we are actually in the maximum, have we seen the peak? And my answer to that is I believe we have. So let's get right into it. So here's where we are right now. This is official from NOAA. I don't usually use these guys, but hey, every once in a while. As you can see, we peaked out last week. We hit another high in sunspots. And then since then, we have dropped down slowly to the low 122 mark, or the 123 mark that we're at today. Now, Valentina Zarkova, and now even the other guy that was a student of hers, I can't remember his name. Mari, what's the other physicist? Scott what? McIntosh? Yeah, McIntosh also is adopting the same exact pattern that Zarkova is, except he doesn't believe it's going to be as a sharp decline. He's predicting maximum to hit still around 2025, but then a sharp decline after that. Zarkova, her model, and what we've always promoted here at Grand Solar Minimum is that we're in a maximum this year, right now. We did hit another peak in sunspot activity. As you can see, we're above that 150 threshold. And in solar cycle 24, we just kissed the line of 150. Now, when this solar cycle forecast came out at the end of solar cycle 24, there was a lot of speculation that this could be lower than 24 or slightly above 24. And I know that's not, the kind of answer that you're looking for, especially when you're trying to validate solar cycles and their connection with Earth. So, with that said, if you follow Zarkova's work, we are definitely at the point where I believe that we have peaked in this solar cycle and that we will see some sustained activity for a brief more months, maybe into early 24 is when we start to see signs of a minimum getting ready to kick in. And I believe that we'll be in the very early stages of a minimum for solar cycle 25 by 2025. So to the folks out there who are jumping up and down because they think that the solar activity is going to continue to peak, it's possible. I'm not saying they're wrong, but right now, if you are following the work of this channel and Zarkova, John Casey, and others, this was expected, and just look at the jump in the activity. And they always say what goes up must come down. The bigger they are, the harder they fall. That's an impressive spike. And if we were right, Zarkova, myself, and others that follow this, then we are going to see that minimum beginning early stages, mid-2024 by early 25, and a sharper decline. I don't think we're going to be, it's not going to take till 2035 to get to the bottom of this cycle. This is going to be a sharp decline, and this is why so many folks believe solar cycle 25 is going to kick off the grand solar minimum. Yes, the solar cycle appears to be a little bit outperforming most of the forecasts that we've had, but if you look at the big picture, and this is an older forecast, so let's change that. I can't change it, but here's the arrow that we thought 25 would be. All right, because look, here's our peak. We've come all the way down, and if this is indeed a grand solar minimum, we just don't start going right back up. Solar cycle 24 is not that low, but it is the lowest we've had in 100 plus years. Okay, so solar cycle 25 is going to perform right about here, right? A little bit above. But if you look at the overall decrease since solar cycle 19, we had the fluke solar cycle 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, everything stepping down. 25 could be that fluke cycle that we had for solar cycle 20. And you saw that spike up to 21. But even with solar cycle 25 outperforming, let's say the solar cycle spot numbers go up a little bit more where the tip of my arrow is, we're still in line for this solar cycle pattern of declining in activity. And when we look at the solar cycle that like I said, this was the original forecast. This is real life. This is the real life though. Oh wait, I'm sorry, this one. This is the real life in real time. But look at the Maunder minimum. It had solar cycles. Look at this. There's a solar cycle that was dropping, and then we had a really low one. This is comparable to solar cycle 24. This, to me, reminds me of what solar cycle 24, 23, 24, and 25 are doing right now. And we still had the very low sunspot activity. So what's going on right now in solar cycle 25 is not calling off the grand solar minimum. The picture is clear to see, guys. We see the increase, now we see the decrease, and if this indeed lines up to historic information, empirical data, that shows us every 405 years we have a grand cycle. Right now, we are getting ready to have the next grand cycle after this solar cycle here as we start to see it decline by the year 2025. We'll see the minimum conditions begin. And it's like I said in the opening of the show, here on the Space Weather Station, when we're looking at the sun right now, And this is supposed to be the peak right here. Now, we have larger sunspots and explosions happening right now on the other side of the sun, but Mario and I were talking about this the other night. The reason why the sun is on the other side, the backside, so to speak, all the planets are lined up on the same side of the orbit right now. So the electric connection, the magnetic connection from the sun to the planets, okay, is a stronger magnetic field on this side. On the rear side, the back side, where all these major explosions are happening, it's just Mars out there by itself. So there's a weaker magnetic connection, and also that's resulting in a weaker magnetic field for Mars as well, being out there all alone, plus the sun's weaker connection because all of its magnetic connection is focused on the same side that Earth is in the rest of the solar system. And if you guys are following the Milankovitch cycle too, it's interesting to note, if you guys take a look at one of those orbit maps, you'll see that we are starting to see that lineup of the four gas giants behind Earth. And that lineup is going to be here by 2024. So this is going to be an interesting, not only are we going to see minimum conditions from the sun, but the Milankovitch cycle is also going to tug on Earth's orbit around the sun and pull it away from the sun. Now, not in the sense where it's going to be catastrophic, but enough. You guys know how minor the TSI change for Earth, the minor effects even affect everything on Earth, climate, temperature, everything. There's a factor in it. So it doesn't have to be a lot of tug. It doesn't have to be millions of miles or anything like that. It doesn't have to be hundreds of miles. Any kind of variation in TSI, whether it's negative or positive, it has an effect. So interesting things are getting ready to happen. And I'm not just jumping on here and spewing this from, shooting from the hip here. I want to show you guys an article. I wish I was doing regular broadcast. I would have done this the day it came out. But I found this, and it's talking about scientists who believe that a maximum could hit us harder and sooner than we thought. How dangerous will the sun's chaotic peak be? And I thought this was a fair article written about the sun's solar cycles and typical stuff. There's actually a few good things here to kind of refresh with. Talking about the solar cycles every 11 years. And I thought it was interesting to read up here. So they talk about, to determine where we are in solar cycle, researchers monitor sunspots, darker, cooler, circular patches of our local star surface where the coronal loops form. Sunspots appear when strong magnetic fields poke through the surface of the sun. By looking at those sunspots, we can get an idea of how strong and complex the sun's magnetic field is at that moment. And these different bands and locations, the further into the middle you see these sunspots, the further in the cycle we are getting towards the maximum and heading into a minimum. It kind of just, that's another indicator there. In April of 2019, a solar cycle panel of scientists out there, dozens of scientists from NASA and NOAA, which, tend to favor a lot of things that could be or couldn't be true. But anyway, that we would begin our solar maximum in 2025 and would be comparable to the size of the maximum of 2024. But from the beginning, the forecast seemed off. For instance, the number of observed sunspots have been much higher than predicted. And this goes on here, December 22, the sunspot was 143 versus the estimated 63. Now, that's that strong incline of this cycle and how fast we are seeing it moving along. There was one other thing that I thought that I could mention here. But the point is why was the forecasting wrong? Why was the forecasting so wrong? Part of the problem is the way the prediction panels come up with their forecasts. And this is Scott McIntosh's excuse. Um, he says NASA and NOAA's models have barely changed in the last 30 years, but the science has. The models use data from past solar cycles as sunspot number and cycle length, but do not fully account for each cycle's individual progression. It's kind of a big game and pin the tail on the donkey, he says, where the donkey is upcoming solar maximum. The prediction panel has blindfolded themselves by not using all available methods to their disposal. Oh, so Mr. McIntosh is on his high horse. Okie dokie. I didn't see that part. Sorry. But anyway, like I said, the forecast was wrong by the mainstream. The mainstream went against what Zarkova's forecast was, which had shown that by 2025 we'd be declining out of a solar maximum. And now we're admitting that our solar maximum will be here by 2024. Or, I'm sorry, be here by the end of 2023. It's already here. But I still think we still see maximum conditions on sunspots and CMEs for a few more months. But early 24 into mid 24, I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see sunspot numbers dropping below 100 more frequently and longer, and slowly but surely start dropping by the time we get to 2025, mid 2025. According to these forecasts, 25, 26, and 27 are going to be sharp declines in solar activity. This minimum, because of the short maximum, is going to result in a long minimum for the upcoming minimum. So we're seeing this powerful burst from the sun that's not really that much powerful than was predicted. Again, some of us got it really low. Some of us were almost even with what the previous forecast is. And the truth is it's going to be a little bit above, right about here now. Okay. But we're still going to see this decline, but it's not going to take till 2035, folks. This is going to be a sharp decline. 2027, 2028, you're going to know we're in a minimum. But the peak is over, in my opinion. But I could be wrong. We've seen this. We saw two different times where I thought we were definitely done with as far as peaking sunspot numbers. But we had an X-class flare of a 2.1 a few weeks ago. And the one thing that I've learned about solar cycles is you can't judge where the peak is until you see the strongest X-class solar flare in that cycle. And before the 2.1, we had a 1.9. So nothing had beaten that yet. And once we had the 2.1, that is also an indicator that either it's possible we could have just exceeded the peak, and that marks the peak, and we start seeing the decline in sunspot numbers, which I want to say since that peak, we have not seen sunspot numbers, I don't think, over 143 or anything like that. It's starting to drop. It was over 197 at one time, I believe. So, again, there's a lot of things that change in these cycles. We don't always get it all right or on point, but this thing is not off the course, as some people are saying. There are scientists out there that are now coming around and saying, okay, well, the solar maximum's here now. But 2 years ago, we were told 2025 was going to be the peak. But it's here now. We're not waiting until 2025. The sun's already at peak activity. And I'm saying by early 24, we'll start to see the declination really obvious, and things will fall sharply, just as predicted in Zarkova's latest model. And I honestly, frankly, when it comes to her models and her work, it's a shame that there is a giant word that is really irrelevant. The calculation that they're picking on that's causing the paper to have this label is so minute. It changes nothing. If anything, the paper validates that the sun does both, not just cool, but it also is responsible for increase of temperature as well because of the magnetic fields. So The work was, in my opinion, fair for both sides of the argument. And right now, it's still holding up its value. It's still accurate. So I thought, the first show I wanted to do, as far as the updates and all that stuff, I wanted to make sure it was about the cycle, where we are, because I've seen a lot of noise on the internet. A lot of people who think that we are just making this up as we go, and that this proves that because the sun's strong right now that we don't have to worry about it anymore. And I'm like, whoa, let's stop right there. There's definitely some people out there who are trying to steer their narrative, and I just don't think that's fair at all. We got to have a voice on both sides, and I'm not saying there's other channels that don't cover this, but when it comes to staying to the course of what the forecasts are and standing by Zarkova's work, in my opinion, based on what we're seeing right now, I don't see any change or any need to adjust it. I think everything is happening accordingly, even with this little indicator right here that shows, more activity. But look, we had a double peak in solar cycle 24. I'd have to talk to Lee Wheelbarger and find out how rare it would be to get a double peak in solar cycle 25 as well. But I don't see it that way. I see things starting to fizzle out right about here, and it's going to be a steep slope down well before 2035. We'll be at the zero sunspot levels by the 2030s, no doubt. And it's going to get rough. Think about it. If we max out our solar activity and we start seeing the drop in the minimum conditions, and we know what happens during minimum conditions, and then you put that on top of where our orbital pattern is during the Milankovitch cycle, and that's tugging Earth just a little bit, slightly. You can thank the four gas giants for that. And you combine these two things, and it's not like that this Milankovitch cycle is just going to go away in a couple of weeks. This is a very, very slow, progressive cycle. So couple that in with, the potential, or not the potential, but the upcoming grand solar minimum that we are approaching. Definitely something to pay attention to. Watching solar activity, could be vulnerable. Our grid could be struck during a solar storm if we're still getting maximum activity. We're not out of the woods. Our magnetic field is not very strong, even though we're in the maximum. It's still a weaker sun, and I've said this before. Looking at the stats, looking at the sun, yeah, it's pushing out more activity than it did in the last 5 years. Of course, we were in a minimum. But the stats are not that impressive. They're not that strong. We're talking about an X class 2.1 flare. It's strong, yes. Don't get me wrong. We got blackouts, but nobody lost the power grid. Nobody lost satellite. Nobody, planes weren't falling out of the sky. This solar cycle is not as strong as it's being claimed to be out there. Just cool it. Just cool it a little bit. Although we've seen some impressive halo CMEs, that's for sure, over the last several days. Very loud. All right, let's check out our weather forecast. I want to show you what we got cooking in the tropics first. The water is still, this is probably about average, guys. This is not like crazy warm. I've seen it much higher than this. At 85 degrees, in my opinion, I've seen it 88, 89 in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico, and especially closer to the shore. These temperatures here, this is a good chance in my mind that we see these drop further into September, and we don't get to have the effects of these strong category 4 or 5 landfalls. Let's hope. But right now, these temperatures are definitely supportive of hurricane activity. We're starting to see some of these forecasters trying to indicate where they think this northward turn is going to take place. Right now, I think this is all guessing. There's even a good chance that this storm is going to stall out. And that's going to be bad news, because if this storm stalls out and there's a trough that they're waiting on that they think is going to pull it out to the middle of the Atlantic, it's possible it can miss that trough altogether. Here's what we got going on for today. Severe thunderstorms again in southern New York, northeast Pennsylvania. This area of the country has been seeing quite a bit of rain as well. We have out there in the Central Plains states. Also severe weather across the south. Much needed rain, hopefully, in southern Texas. Trying to break this heat out there, guys. And taking a look one more time at Hurricane Lee. Surprised Wheelbarger isn't covering this. Like, they've named one after him. Like, you would think this would be a 24/7 stream. Like, let's follow Lee Wheelbarger and put some night vision goggles on the hurricane, see what happens. Just kidding. I hope he hears that. He knows I'm joking. All right, let's take a look at our weather. There is another system behind Lee, Margaret, but again, this is all dependent on what happens with this high pressure system, and I'll show you what I mean. Up here in the, well, if I can get my arrow here, I feel like, there we go. So I want you to watch this high pressure system here and how it pushes out further north than originally forecasted. Plus, at the end of this tank, and I'll go ahead and stop it here. That way I can show you what I'm talking about. All right. Ooh, wow, you really can't see it there. Okay. So here we have this high pressure system, and it is pushing this low pressure away in this model. Previous models I've seen has been further south, which really pushes it out of the way. So if this starts slowing down its approach to the East Coast, and this also slows down, you would think that this would still get caught up in that trough and be pulled out to the Atlantic Ocean. And that's possible, but this storm is still another 8 days away. So there's a lot of things that still have to happen. Now, right now, the GFS is showing us that things look like we're not going to be affected by this strong hurricane. Right now, it's Category 4. But if this storm slows down like it did for Dorian, and hopefully that doesn't happen, but if this storm becomes stationary or slows way down, it's possible this high pressure comes out and this pressure system here does not catch on to that trough and it does not get swept away. What happens next is that we could see the possibility of this low pressure scraping the coast all the way up through the northeast like a nor'easter. But right now, that's not the case. And the models are saying 8 days out that this looks like a system that is, we're not totally out of the woods, but this is encouraging to see that northerly turn. And that means that high pressure system is doing its job and protecting the, basically you could see it right now over Lake Erie, and now it's in New York on this frame. So again, that high pressure sticking around is what's pushing it off to sea. There's no indication unless this low pressure system right here was to arrive quicker and block that high. That's a lot of what ifs. And you know what I always say about this forecast system, don't trust it outside of 4 days, right? And really, guys, if you oh, what was that? Snow in Canada, guys. Are you ready to hear about that? Up here in the northeast here, you can see the snow showers up in this low pressure system. So there's some colder air already flirting with this. And then you see Margaret hanging out in the mid-Atlantic. Wow, that thing really blows up. 949 peak. Oh, now. Oh, wow. So that's an interesting model. I had not seen the end of this run yet. So lots of action to kind of watch here. We're on the good side of Lee right now. I think Lee may miss the United States, but this brand new feature that I just seen here, this was not here before the show. So I've just seen this live with you guys. Wow. Interesting to see if this high pressure system up here, if this has anything to do with this system, and can it reach down to the East Coast fast enough to keep this thing from basically making landfall with New York City Long Island, I mean, heesh. Jersey, that's a big storm. But the good news is, look at that, 964. Okay, and that pressure is going to continue to rise because the waters right here are nowhere the temperatures down here in the Gulf. So big, impressive, monster-looking like storms. But the good news is that water temperatures up here are not going to support a Category 4 landfall. It could be a strong 2. I'm not discounting it. I'm not saying it's going to diminish it all, but it's not as bad as it looks. I hope. But it does look like we have some favorable setups again that could help steer this storm away from the United States. But it is interesting to see on this run, and this is way too far to really even watch it, but in the interest of weather, I have to look at it. And it looks like it's making there's not catching on to any kind of trough or anything like that. It's making a direct approach. So hopefully this high pressure can do something about that. But we'll keep our eyes on Margaret. First, we'll deal with Lee, and then we'll deal with Margaret later, I guess. Temperatures, like I said earlier, most of the country is remaining in that hot zone, but we do see here on Monday, September 11th, some relief to the Central Plains. 60s and 70s, much better there. This is all next week for Wednesday. Temperatures in the 60s in the Northeast, in the 70s. Same thing in Ohio, Cleveland, Ohio, Akron, Ohio, 63 degrees for daytime highs. Looks like we see 50 degrees highs in parts of the North Country of New York, central New York as well. But a little bit of heat running up the I-87 is going to keep things in the 70s up there. And then moving along, let's see what we got going on. Moving forward, a lot chillier air at night, 40s and 50s for lows. And still pockets of warm air. But, this has also kind of died down a little bit, too. It was much hotter a couple days ago. 80s, not that uncommon in the middle of the country. But once again, Texas starting to see that big heat wave again on the 19th of September. Meanwhile, the rest of the country, by the time we get to September 20th, it's going to start to feel like fall. If you live in Ohio, Pennsylvania, anywhere in the Northeast, it's going to start to feel like fall by the third week of September. So things look pretty normal. We do see some blue coming out there. Look at this. This looks like the pattern that we've seen over the last 2 years. You get that, actually the last 3 or 4 years, where this is the wavy jet stream. And the central part of the United States heats up like it did last year, and we get cooler on the northwest and the northeast. Now we have freezing temperatures approaching the United States border by Friday, September 22nd. Nothing crazy. A little bit of warm up here towards the end of the month, it looks like, here for much of the country, even the Northeast getting back into the 70s. But again, Indian summer, possibly. So we'll keep our eyes on that. Hundreds are forecasted in California. And everybody's probably saying, Jake, what is going on? Why are we, this is the grand solar minimum. I thought temperatures are going to drop. Well, we are in an El Nino, and we're not at the peak of this El Nino yet. It's a 1.26 right now. That is right around the threshold of a strong, like a Modaki, but starting to become a little more consistent, a little stronger during, this was the same kind of temperature El Nino we had during 2015, which is the last time we saw the UAH peak above 6.9. And if you guys follow the UAH, it came in for August at 0.69. Well, it's not a coincidence. It peaked at 0.69 in 2015 or 16. We were in an El Nino. We've had 3 straight seasons of La Ninas. And now our first El Nino season, we get a peak of 0.69. So we'll see what September does. And I think that we'll see a little bit of a drop, but not much. And this is usually a slow but gradual drop. Once it peaks like this, it took a few months for the global temperatures to drop down below 0.3. So it'll be interesting to see what happens over the next few months. Actually, I want to show that real quick because I wanted to ask you guys out there in the audience if you thought that there is a such thing as a bookend on a plateau of something. So hold on. All right. I'm a guy I'm just all about the visuals, right? All right. Peekaboo! It's hot, guys. All right. That was not the screen I was trying to go after. Here we go. So, that's what I get. Oh, no. I got to like shorten this here. Okay. Well, you can sort of see it. So, here was the last peak, and this was during an El Nino year. In fact, I remember going to Cleveland, Ohio in December of 2015. And it was 65 degrees in Cleveland during this little spike here because it was in December. And if you look here, this is right between 2015 and 16 where this spike is. And I was in Cleveland. We were in an El Nino wearing shorts at a Browns game. I mean, that's not it at worst or at best, it's 35 degrees on a December 15th day in Cleveland, not no 65. So it'll be interesting to see if this fall and winter follow suit and we don't get cold till after January. It's possible. But I remember watching Joe Bastardi's video back in 2017, and he identified this peak as the beginning of a new plateau. And here it is. This was a plateau here. This was a plateau here. So I'm just putting it out there that this little peak here is the indicator of the end of a plateau. Where it goes from here remains to be seen. Right? Anybody that watches this channel knows what I'm talking about. And with that being said, I want to say hello to a few people out there in the chat. It's good to see you out there. Jesse Vorwald. Nice to see you, sir. Jason. Trinity 88. Of course, my lovely wife, Mari Antolio. Let's see. Danny in the chat. Sue Hayes. Good to see you out there. Shout out to Patricia Clayton as well. King Edward. Good to have you in the chat. And many, many others. Some I recognize, some I don't. So this was kind of last minute planning. But Mari and I have really taken the time to reanalyze things and just put together, information for you guys to keep up with and understand that, there's hiccups and we have to see the bigger picture. And that's what this show used to be called back in the old days at WTF Sky. When Lee and I first started doing this topic, our show was called The Big Picture. And it was long-term stuff and, solar cycles and temperature drops and rises. These are decadal things. And it's going to be a long journey. And I'm interested to see where we go from here. But as I said at the beginning of this broadcast, I believe that we are where we should be when it comes to this solar cycle. Yeah, we're slightly performing a little bit higher than what they thought, but I don't believe we're going to see any more peaking in this upcoming series of months that are coming. I could be wrong. I'm not a scientist, but I'm just following a forecast, and that forecast was 97% accurate last solar cycle. So I'm just saying. I'm going off of that. I like those numbers. All right, guys, that's going to do it for us on this fine Saturday. Right now, we're just doing the Saturday live updates. There will be short videos and stuff like that coming in the future. And, of course, there could be morning updates as well throughout the week on the solar weather, but those will be shorter little videos. But if you like what you see today here, go ahead and look us up on Patreon. That's where our monthly subscribers for donations go to. Of course, there's Super Chat on YouTube. And I don't believe we do memberships on YouTube. I don't think we're just leaving that for the Patreon. So lots of cool stuff coming up for the channel. Mari is in the works of doing some things in behind the scenes, and we'll have a lot better perspective of what we can bring you here in the near future. But yeah, so every Saturday we shoot for a afternoon show, an update, and then throughout the week we'll try to get you guys some little tiny updates throughout the week on solar activity. And of course, Mari has lots of great ideas. So other than that, thank you guys for tuning in to the Grand Solar Minimum channel. It's great to be back, and you have a great day, guys. We'll talk soon.